Keep trying. Okay, if I can have everyone's attention, I'd like to ask everyone to come on in and take your seats. We are actually going to continue on with our schedule to stay on time. My name is Hillary Jenkins. I'm a professor at the University of Redlands here locally, and I'll be moderating this session. So I'm going to get going with introducing our first speaker, which is Robert Fisher from the USGS, who will be telling us a bit about a series of reptile surveys that he has done here in the Santa Ana watershed. So take it away, Robert.
Hey, sorry, this is too low for me. I don't know what to do. No, I have to like this. Hey everybody. I'm not sure. Can you guys hear me without this? Okay, good. It's coming through the microphone. Oh, is it? Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna wait a sec because people are still coming in, but I'm using up my time. Sadly, I really appreciated what Heather said about greatness. Heather is greatness. Betsy is greatness. These guys are inspirations for us as scientists to continue to do the work, and to watch them, both Heather and Betsy, move up their chains to where they're at now has really been impressive. And to bring up their, is this better? Yeah, to bring up their teams with them and others like us is great. So I appreciate that. I also want to say that if I don't recognize you immediately, it's because I've only seen people in boxes for 5 years. And I only would recognize you by your background. So, because that's how I recognize people now, because that's what I see bigger than their faces. So I was at the first conference that we had, but I haven't seen a lot of people in a lot of years. So definitely don't be offended if I don't recognize you immediately when I see you here. What we've been doing is we've been looking a lot at urban patches in Southern California and the value of urban patches. I have a whole presentation on that. I'm not going to give today because I only have 8 minutes and 30 seconds left. But I wanted to do is talk about the work we just recently did with the district on some of their new parcels, which ties into my urban patches talk. So I'm going to focus on that. We have a team of biologists that have been working with us to do this work, and I'm going to jump right in. Basically, I'm going to show pictures and maps, and not so many words. So there's a series of patches that the Valley's picked up recently as part of their HCP planning, their watershed planning, and we did some initial investigations of the biodiversity value for several taxa at these sites this last year. This last year was unfortunate because it was drier than 2023, but wetter than possibly this year, so it fits in the middle maybe. We had a variety of techniques. I'll talk about the techniques first, and then I'll talk about the results. One of the techniques, here's just showing 3 techniques right here. There's the cover boards. I forgot to have a pointer. Careful. And then we did these little transect arrays where we have a camera station here with a camera facing out and a camera facing down to try to get at both reptiles, amphibians, small mammals, and some birds. And then the cover boards for small mammals and reptiles and amphibians. And then this is a close-up of that camera station. So the fences help direct animals to the center point, and then the camera facing lateral, it will take pictures of animals crossing through this space, and then this one is a traditional wildlife camera looking for coyotes and deer and stuff like that. Again, these are just initial surveys, again, a first assessment to think about how we might do management and monitoring at these sites. Here's a cover board. So these are basically kind of a standard herp technique that poachers use, but we also use them for understanding how things or where things live on the landscape. We did our early assessment for ants. This is a quick metric we have where it's a index card with some cookie bait. It's called a Sandy's cracker. We have a standardized protocol, and we can assess whether Argentine ants are at these sites. Argentine ants as an indicator of invasiveness of the site, and also often aseasonal flows and stuff. And so that's kind of a metric of disturbance. And then here's an Anabat data logger using natural features. And so the Anabat data logger, it picks up the sonograms of the bats, so we can get at the bat community, just diversity. So again, these are the study sites. So we had Frisbee Wash, Redlands Airport, Mill Creek, and then Morton Canyon, Santa Ana River. Some of these are really important buffer sites where they're connecting to larger patches and helping create connectivity through the system. Some are more isolated and there's less connectivity at the moment. We just focused on, like I said, these quick patches, and then I'll show the diversity of techniques at each patch. So here's the Frisbee site. So these are the ant transects we did. We did visual encounter surveys at both these patches. And then visual encounter was another technique for reptiles where our team is out there walking around, flipping over natural features, looking for animals in the landscape. And like I said, because it was a drought year and we got a little bit late start, we saw less than we might have seen in 2023, a much wetter year. The other thing is the filled circles are circles where we detected Argentine ants, the invasive ant that has super colonies in Southern California, wipes out native ant diversity, wipes out beetle diversity, and impacts, therefore impacts prey, ant that are prey for other species like horned lizards. So we had, like this site was impacted by Argentine ants, but these sites are in good shape. These sites were too risky to put in the camera setup, so we didn't do that, but we did set up an Anabat. Here's the site at Redlands Airport. These are the 3 camera arrays. No Argentine ants detected here, and then an Anabat station there. No Argentine ants detected at the Mill Creek site, so that's great. We do have data on some of the native ants, but this isn't the best technique for surveying native ants. We normally do that with small pitfall vials, and then identify them in the lab. This was just a quick assessment at health, basically. Anabat, and then a bunch of camera arrays. And then again, every site had visual encounter surveys for reptiles. This one at Morton, this mesic area in the middle of the canyon along the road, that's where we did pick up Argentine ants. And then the last site was the Santa Ana River. And again, some of these are kind of buffering against other natural habitats, and you can see the Anabat and then those arrays. These are what the photos look like. We have over 40,000 photos of animals from the camera stations. Lots of reptiles. So this is a red diamond rattlesnake. Lots of sensitive species like red diamond sensitive. Here's a roadrunner. Here's a quail with some baby quail, or quailets, I guess. I don't know what you call them. And then here's a chipmunk. This is a red racer. So Milan did this work for his thesis, working on red racer and their movements, and a California king snake. These are just exemplars I wanted to show you of what kind of data we're collecting. And then there's a bobcat, which is in the camera facing down. Normally we'd see them sideways, so it went underneath the camera station. Here's a coyote, and then some, whatever you call those things, deer? Yeah, mule deer. And then more sensitive species. Here's a California glossy snake, legless lizard, and then gaggle of rattlesnakes. I'm not sure. It's not a murder of crows. I don't know what you call the group of rattlesnakes, but a pile of rattlesnakes underneath the cover board. So you can get a sense of the diversity. Like I said, no words, just a lot of pictures on my talk. Again, more sensitive species, western spadefoot, the coast horned lizard, there's the banded gecko, and then slender salamanders. So we really picked up a lot of interesting diversity at these sites in a really basically quick assessment. And really hope to use this forward to do more planning with the district and with other partners in the landscape here. Here's just a quick assessment of these survey techniques. So this is the cover boards, the visual encounters, and then the arrays, the camera arrays, and then the diversity of reptiles and amphibians. So some things, like Calosaurus is a desert lizard. This is a zebra-tailed lizard that lives in the California deserts. We only picked it up at the Frisbee Wash site. It's only on the coast, really, by Temecula-Aguanga, and then in the Santa Ana system. And so it's a really interesting, unique coastal invasion of a desert species. And we only did visual encounters at Frisbee Wash. But you can see a lot of these cameras, the photos picked up tons of individuals of some of these other taxa at those sites, more than the visuals and more than the cover boards. And so, but we did have pretty good diversity at the Frisbee site, and the best diversity was over here at the Santa Ana River site. Here's some bats, more photos. There's a red bat, a Yuma myotis, and a big brown bat. These are just stock photos from my lab. Like, these are from work we did in San Diego with Betsy, I think, even when Betsy was at the city, when we did these bat work. But we got a good diversity of bats. We picked up 13 species. So these are the non-sensitive species, things like silver-haired bats, Mexican free-tailed bats, and then we picked up 4 species of special concern: western mastiff bat, western red bat, western yellow bat, and the pocketed free-tailed bat. And then, so we have good diversity detected: 21 reptiles and amphibians, 12 birds and mammals. More than that, because we have thousands and thousands of unidentified rodents, thousands and thousands of photos. And then 13 bats, low invasive species presence, like no opossums. Various disturbance sources we detected. There's a small table here. And these are really important buffer habitats for connectivity and for small patch size. So I'll end with that. Thanks. I have time for questions.
Robert, any
In
questions?
the back. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead of you.
No,
Yeah.
that was it. You got it.
Yeah, just scream.
I was curious about your site selection and, yeah, just kind of what considerations you had when choosing sites. Was it usually private land, public land?
No, all of that is owned by the Valley District. Those patches were, and we were sampling within those new patches that were acquired as part of the conservation of this upper watershed. So those were conservation lands in fee title to the Valley District, yes. Yeah, no worries. Any other questions real quick? Okay, one last one and then we're gonna move on. Okay. Yeah, we were trying to get the different habitats within them, but also trying to avoid urban influence, human influence. And so some of those have a lot of exposure, and some have less exposure. And the sites aren't massive, so we really tried to kind of fit them in where we could to get at that diversity of habitats within each site. That's a good question. Thanks. Apparently, I have to move on. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, I will introduce our next speaker, who is Kerwin Russell from the Southwest Resource Management Association and the Riverside Corona Resource Conservation District, wearing many hats. And he will be speaking to us today about a study that he's done on minnows, I believe.
Good morning, everyone. Appreciate you spending the morning with us. Good to see people I know and the ones I don't. Appreciate having the time to come out today. I do work at both agencies. I'm primarily at the Conservation District, but I'm the field supervisor for the Southwest Resource Management Association, which is acronym SRMA. And we've been working with the Department of Fish and Wildlife on dace occupation and occurrence, and back and forth with the Fish and Wildlife Service on the possible listing of this species. So I have lots of pictures. I don't have a lot of data yet. We're still collecting that and getting information together. So primarily, we have pretty much just 6 native freshwater species in Southern California. And there's one that's down in the desert, the pupfish, but primarily that's what we have to work with here. We don't have a wide variety of freshwater fishes where you go back east and you've got dozens and dozens and dozens of them. So for us, they're really important, and they're indicators of how well the watersheds are doing. Of course, you know the Santa Ana sucker, that's been kind of the front and center of everything. But there's other species here, the speckled dace, royal chub, three-spined stickleback. That little guy is really pretty when he's in his spawning colors. Rainbow trout, we do have trout here. My uncle lives in Utah, and he always tells me, how do you do any fishing down there? There's no water. So I took him up the Santa Ana River, went up to South Fork, hiked up the stream there and caught brown trout, rainbow trout, and he was really amazed that there was actually water there you could fish in, that you could wade in as well. So we do have resources that are very important, and a lot of times those get overlooked. So right now, the speckled dace, the Santa Ana speckled dace, primarily occurs in these watersheds here. We have Los Angeles River, which is mainly up in Big Tahunga Creek. The San Gabriel River, you got the east, north, and west forks. Lago Cajon Complex, which is right off the 15 freeway there, and Lago Creek up in the lower eastern part of Mount Baldy. The upper Santa Ana River and the upper part of the San Jacinto River. So there's some places where they're very common and other places where they'd be considered extant and very low populations, but they are still there. So the fish is relatively small. If you see a 4-inch fish, that's a big fish. This one here was out of Hemlock Creek. It's a female. She's gravid, and that was just here, I think in April or May of this year. They don't live very long, and of course, if they're in an area where they have a lot of impacts, they live less than that. A lot of them don't make it to their second year. The ones that are in better habitat, they can be up to 3 years old. And it really likes good quality water, cool temperatures year-round, varied habitat with good food sources. So it's a good indicator of water quality. So what we've been doing is mainly doing presence-absence surveys. There's a lot of places where the fish occurs. The numbers fluctuate. We've been places where we've gone back and seen dozens and dozens, and this year we went back and saw 1 or 2. So the numbers do change. The maps that I have on here are all draft. They're not set in stone. So you may say, well, wait a minute, I saw this, or this looks different. Those are going to be nailed down here in the next few months. We counted all the fish that we saw or caught. We tried to estimate the extent of the population currently. Again, last year and the year before, we had a lot of rain. Some of the mountain ranges here had 30, 40 inches of rain. You guys remember back, I guess it was in January or February, where people up in Arrowhead were putting Help Me in the snow. They had 18 feet of snow. So we had a really great season. This year, it's like, where is it? So hopefully we'll get rain this weekend. We were updating the maps and the locations, and then we're monitoring with the department and the service as well. Our gear is mainly underwater cameras. We have a splash cam. You guys ever watch Deadliest Catch? That's the same equipment we use. Sometimes we have a face mask. We have an oxscope, and some locations we were able to get, working with the department, we were able to get in and use a Smith Root backpack shocker as well, and that really gives us a better idea of what's going on. The upper watersheds, of course, are really good water quality, not a lot of impacts. You can go on a holiday weekend, walk in off the road and never see anybody. So there's not a lot going on up there. The lower watersheds, of course, have a lot of impacts. So the upper watersheds, that's why my uncle was saying, does that really look like Southern California? But it does. And these all have a lot of water in them because these were taken just after the years we've had all the rain. The lower watersheds, of course, you have a lot of vegetation. Some of it's exotic. The water's shallow, it's wide, a lot of sand. It gets really warm during the summer. So a lot of these fish don't like that. And then we have human impacts. Of course, the homeless have just exponentially grown. A lot of the fires that have been here recently with all the wind have been homeless camps. You've got buildings and stuff right up against the river. They fall in. The homeless cut down the habitat. It's really difficult to control that. And then, of course, we have the drought. We know we have a drought. We have a good year. We're going to have a drought. The fire impacts, and recently, this was on the right there was Coldwater Creek back in 2018. So it was like the moon. You look at it now, it's really recovered well. But they do have an impact in the short term. So right now, we're looking at places that have high abundance of dace right now. A lot of these have over 100 fish observed. You can almost go anywhere and see these fish there. Again, they do fluctuate, and they're very cryptic, so it's hard to see them if there's a lot of vegetation or there's material on the bottom of the creek. It's hard to see them, but they are there. San Gabriel River has a high number. Lido Creek, and both Lido Creek and Cajon, you can go up there, and there's hundreds and hundreds in the creek there almost every time you go. City Creek is recovered. It had a fire. We thought that fish was extirpated out of that creek, and it has recovered very well. You can go there and find hundreds as well. And Plunge Creek, which unfortunately just burned in the line fire. And so we have both trout and dace in that stream. So we're going to be monitoring that in the next several months to see how that recovers. Of course, this Big Tahunga Creek, it's not a really big river. Of course, when it rains, it can drown you. But in the summer and fall, a nice little quaint stream with suckers and dace in there, as well as royal chub. San Gabriel River, of course, big watershed, can have lots of water or hardly any. There's quite a few dace in both these, or excuse me, all three of those forks. Ladder Creek, again, and Cajon Creek. Cajon Creek has a little bit less flow, but it's very prolific with this particular fish. And Ladder Creek as well. That creek has a lot of summertime use. There's a lot of recreational dams, a lot of trash left over, as well as the San Gabriel River has that same impact. But the fish tend to not be impacted as much by that, but be less would be a lot better. Plunge Creek, there on the left, this year again it had a lot of rain, a lot of snowmelt, a lot of flow. We were up there, it's like 10 or 11 CFS, usually it's like 1, so a lot of water, but the fish is there. City Creek again, there on the bottom right, nice deep pools, a lot of fish in those. And so the waters that we've been looking at that don't have any or have very little, the South Fork of the San Jacinto River, which is a very large river for where it is. It flows out of Hemet Lake. There's about 8 miles of stream. And that entire length, all the way down to almost the city of Hemet, we only saw about 5 fish. And before that, there was many hundreds. So there was drying events there that may have contributed to that decline. Indian Creek is mostly on reservation land. There's a couple of fish that we saw down near the confluence, but that was because there was so much water. I think a lot of those fish got washed down to that point. Waterman Creek, we did not see any, but we did work with the department and we translocated several hundred fish there this year. So we're going to watch those and see how they do. Fred Alba Creek, we saw 1 fish the last couple of years, but we also translocated fish there from City Creek as that creek was drying out down in the city of Highland. And then we put another couple hundred in Alder Creek, and there was no fish in that creek before this. There is trout there, but now we have dace, and we're going to monitor that population as well. And then Hemlock Creek does have dace in it, and every year we've gone, we've found them, but there's not very many. So a lot of that creek has natural barriers, so once they get below a certain point, they can't get back upstream. So that has a lot to do with how that population works. The places where the fish have been lost, Silverado Creek, there was a fire there several years ago, and with all the rain and everything, that population is pretty much gone. We haven't found any for the many times that we've gone up there. Santiago Creek, again, these are all connected and eventually drain into the Santa Ana. That creek has also lost its population. And Majestic Creek, we haven't found any fish in there at all. So those are gone. And then the Strawberry Twin Creek, which is up in the San Bernardino Mountains above San Bernardino, that had a fire there, I want to say in 08 or 09, and that population was lost due to the fire. This is Indian Creek up on the Forest Service land, and these all look really great. San Jacinto, South Fork had a lot of water this year again. We did not find hardly any fish there. Waterman Creek again, up at the top, a lot of water. Fred Alba Creek has water. They all really have good flows, but the numbers fluctuate greatly. So these are the numbers we found. This is the San Jacinto River. You can see up there by Hemet Lake, we found 2 fish near there, another 2 fish down by the ranger station, and then 1 fish there on Indian Creek. And then these watersheds here, both Plunge and City Creek, we've seen over 100 fish in those. Again, I don't have a total population estimate for those waters. We can estimate those as we collect more information, but just visually, there's hundreds there. The 6 there is the fish in Hemlock Creek, and then the 1 in Fred Alba. So again, the ones with the yellow circles, we didn't find any dace in those. And then these are the ranges of the population. Again, the long yellow band there, that's the Hemet Lake population. There's a little population that's between a dry reach on the South Fork and then, of course, the Indian Creek population there. And these are not very long. We're talking a mile or a mile and a half on some of these. So they're living within that range of water. And again, the upper part of the stream dries out in the summer and the lower part dries out. So that's the area where the springs and the runoff maintain a population, or excuse me, the water year-round. And then the upper Santa Ana, these are Lower Waterman, or the Waterman Creek there, that's arranged there. And again, there's barriers there, so as fish move down, they can't get back up. So monitoring that will be very critical in determining the meta populations that could establish there. City Creek, again, has a fairly decent extent. Plunge Creek, and then over in Hemlock. So again, these are not very long. We're talking a couple miles. And then, I don't know what happened to the slide presentation. My stars are all stretched out. The lower portion of the river, what we call the Middle River, we have found fish up near Waterman Avenue in San Bernardino. Again, these were all in the late winter, early spring, February. We found a couple fish down here in Riverside below La Cadena back in 2011. But the most recent find was here this summer when we did our sucker survey with USGS. We found 6 fish near the outflow of Ricks and Rialto, a confluence, in the middle of summer, which was I've never seen that before. So that's all been fish that have washed down during the winter. We had a lot of rain. So they were maintaining, and they found a spot where the water wasn't too hot. Because just downstream of this, I think the water was near 95 degrees. So that would have killed those fish. But because the Ricks plant has an outflow that's a lot cooler than the river, they were able to maintain. Now, we went back here, I'm trying to remember when we went back. It was just here a month ago, and shocked that area again, and we didn't find them. So they've either been eaten by catfish, or they died. They just couldn't make it through the rest of the summer. So, but that's a very interesting find. So, and then these are the extents of the populations in Cone and Latta Creek. Again, my lines are going up on top of the mountain, so excuse me on that those are not accurate. And those have really robust populations of fish. San Gabriel River and Tahunga, they're all through these. And again, it looks like my dog drew these lines on there, so I did not do that. So, sorry. So our big thing is water quality, sedimentation, things like that are really affecting them. And I want to I want to thank Monica and her staff for helping us with these, Brett, Alicia, Tevin, Thomas from the Forest Service, and Julie from the Forest Service as well. And anytime, you are welcome to contact me if you want more information, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kerwin. We have time for a couple of questions if there are any. Go ahead.
What's your take on the recreational damming and the impacts? Obviously, it's a human impact.
Right, and the ones that are really bad are the San Gabriel River. The joke there is if you go up on a summer weekend that you don't have to get in the water because you're going to be stepping on top of people. There's just so many people there, you can't see the water. So it does make an impact, and when they bring in plastic sheeting and build dams and stuff, it stops the movement of the fish in there. A lot of it, too, is the trash afterwards. So it does have a temporary impact, and I know the Forest Service is in there in the fall taking the dams down, and a lot of times when you have a big rainfall event, it just washes them out anyway. So there's a period of time, probably from May till October, where there's a heavy impact, especially on the weekends. So what that is, I don't know for sure, because the fish already are impacted by other problems, but that's just compounding it. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have another question in the back.
Yeah, Kerwin, thanks for the presentation. What's the source of the fish that were put in those 3 reintroduced sites?
That was City Creek.
So City Creek was the source for those?
Yeah.
3. Okay.
Yes. So Monica from the department has all. We have numbers, Monica, right? Yeah, we have some numbers. So I didn't put that on here. I wanted to try to get through it. There's a lot of information we're still collecting. So once it's all finalized, we'll have that available. But yeah, we're still working on that. Was there any other questions? Is that it?
Okay, well, thank you, Kerwin. Yeah.
Okay, while we're getting set up, I'll just make one brief announcement, which is that on your schedule, Jenny Robinette was going to be presenting next, but will be presenting at 1 p.m. right after lunch. So you can look forward to her talk then. And now we will transition to our keynote.
Almost good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Wendy Katagi with Macmillan, and formerly with Stillwater Sciences, so I still think of them as my family. We partner a lot. Today it's a historic moment for us to have Secretary Wade Crowfoot, our Secretary of Natural Resources for the state of California, here with us to share his thoughts about 30 by 30 conservation, biodiversity, water resources, and of course, things hitting the news like the fires. And I just wanted, by a show of hands, to see how many of you already know what 30 by 30 is. Terrific. For those of you who don't, Secretary Crowfoot is planning to give a high-level overview of what 30 by 30 is, but basically it's by 2030 to reach certain metrics for the state of California. He is such an influencer. If you follow him on social media, you'll know that he is a global voice for conservation and biodiversity and has been a role model, really, for the UN and for the Paris Agreement on climate change and so forth. So we're so honored to have him here today. He is actually here on the campus for the first time, so even though he knows Jack Dangerman and has been in climate talks with Esri, he is currently touring really quick before he has to head out to Malibu for some fire emergency business. So I'm going to go ahead and use this time to explain the panel that we'll be having. So in addition to working across watersheds, beyond the keynote, which Secretary Crowfoot will deliver, we have some champions here from other watersheds who will be speaking, in addition to Heather Dyer for Santa Ana Watershed, about what is going on, what is the story about biodiversity, where are we moving the needle, and where do we still need to go? Narit Katz, Commissioner Katz from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is here. She is also appointed to serve with Secretary Crowfoot on the 30 by 30 statewide initiatives and represent the Los Angeles and Greater SoCal Basin. She will be talking to us about urban biodiversity right in our backyard. What do we need to be thinking about? And quick shout out to Isaac Brown, Stillwater, who is also working on these connectivity issues. He's here today. And in addition to that, we have Nathan Nunez, and he is such an amazing change leader. And I will let him introduce himself, but I believe it's the Hopshavit clan of the San Gabriel Mountains, and he'll correct anything I mispronounced. But he was at the White House very recently to work on the expansion of the San Gabriel National Monument, covering over to the Arroyo Seco and other parts of the San Gabriels, which is really integral to the story of Headwaters resiliency. And we have Brian Baldoff was supposed to be here, but he has a conflict. He is the deputy executive director for the Mountains Recreation Conservation Authority, who has been working across watersheds, including the Santa Ana watershed now, on conservation, acquisition of lands, stewardship, and things like how do we bring back steelhead when they're landlocked in the Arroyo Seco, which is the headwaters of the LA River, or part of the headwaters. There's 4,000 of them, and there's Devil's Gate Dam there. But anyway, Brian has been instrumental working on LA River ecosystem restoration. I will be covering some of that work that Stillwater and our teaming partners have been working on to implement the first crack the concrete in the LA River for steelhead. And they are in the system. So it's all about how do we, as scientists and engineers, think outside the box, implement these restoration initiatives and policies that have been adopted for 20 years, and make it happen. So that is what is going on. I'm looking for him, he's not here yet. Okay, so yeah, so we know that there's a lot to talk about, and I know a lot of you are thinking about the fires. We heard about Harupa just getting ignited. This is so much about our rivers and about stewardship, about sediment movement, and about recovery of the Santa Ana sucker and so many other species. So I'm just thinking about what we as scientists, we as watershed scientists from the Santa Ana watershed, what is our story? Because so much of this workshop today and into tomorrow is about the next generation leaders. This is our grandkids, their kids. What is, like Heather's saying, our active greatness, like our personal story? What is our imprint that we will leave? And I'm not gonna cry. Okay, Heather? All right, so yes, it's really important for us to hear from Secretary Crowfoot today, and I know that he's having such an exciting time. Let me just hit some other items while we're here. He's here?
He's in.
Okay.
He's on his way.
Okay.
But I just wanted to say, if you don't know Wendy yet, you should be so inspired by this woman. She has been working actively on restoration of the LA River, a concrete-lined channel for fish, for the entire time I've known you. And to me, that is the greatest level and demonstration of commitment to what most people would say is hopeless. And she sees hope where many people have just been willing to walk away and just say those fish can just live up in that tiny pocket of water up in the mountains and hopefully they won't get burned over. But Wendy is a fierce, fierce champion for conservation and science and collaboration and working together, and she is one of my dream guardians. And I just want you all to know her and appreciate her and feel inspired by her work and pass it forward to all of the people here in the Santa Ana and beyond.
Wonderful.
Because like I said, earlier, the species, they don't stop at our boundaries. And Wendy has not let it stop her either. So I'm so appreciative and grateful to you, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Yes, and we're so excited. Part of joining Macmillan is the Dam Removal Europe movement. They've got 20,000 dams that they're trying to remove for free-flowing rivers from France to Switzerland to Portugal. And so I'm so excited to be part of all these partners working together for 30 by 30 and bringing it home. No matter what your language or race, it's all about what is my home, where do I live, what watershed, and how do I help? So with that, thank you, Secretary Crowfoot, for being here. You can come on up and address this group of scientists. We're so excited you're here.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for the invitation, and I'm really glad that huge photograph of me got taken off the screen. It's a little jarring to see yourself on such a big screen. But I'm excited to be here for a couple of reasons, and I'll share those. The first is we are in an incredible place at ESRI. Many of you probably know or have worked with ESRI or used ArcGIS, but this is a pretty incredible California-based company. I've become friends with Jack Dangermond, who is the founder of ESRI, still doing his work from an office upstairs. The son of nursery owners, grew up right around here, and built a company essentially from his living room that has turned into one of the largest, if not the largest, company across the world doing really interesting GPS and GIS work. And what I love about Esri and what I love about Jack is how much they love conservation and nature in California. Jack himself and his wife are big conservationists and helping preserve some incredible areas of land, including an area at Point Conception north of Santa Barbara, which is one of our most sensitive and special places in California. And then Esri is always leaning in with us in state government and trying to figure out how they can help us. Of course, we're licensing ArcGIS, so that's part of it, but above and beyond, they sat with us when we conceived of this 30 by 30 effort in California, this commitment we have to conserve 30% of our lands and coastal waters by 2030, and said, well, what would a tool look like that could help you do that? And that was really the genesis of California Nature. And if you go to californianature.org, we have what we think is one of the most sophisticated decision support tools in the world that help people understand how best to conserve lands, how best to manage lands for a number of values, not only for biodiversity and plants and animals, but for access, particularly expanding access where Californians don't have them, or for carbon sequestration, or for wildfire management. So it's a thrill to be at Esri. I've been on a lot of Zooms with people from Esri, and they always have these incredible backgrounds, looking at trees through glass. And now we're on this really verdant campus, and I totally get it, given that Jack grew up in a tree nursery, and he's built this campus to feel like a forest. So big thanks there. Big thanks also to the Water Agency. I mean, one of the reasons I'm here is, we need to work together to manage our natural resources in a way that work for people and nature. I believe in my bones that we succeed or fail as humans to the extent that we care for this world that we're in. And that can feel a little bit like a bumper sticker, but it's absolutely essential. Healthy landscapes, healthy nature means healthy natural resources and healthy people. I have spent the better part of 2 weeks down here supporting CAL FIRE in our agency and others that have been responding to these horrific wildfires in Los Angeles. I'm going to leave right after I talk, and I'm headed back into Los Angeles to work with elected officials. And this is a great example of two major challenges that we're facing. One is obviously, the growing extremes of our climate. We've said it before and we'll say it again, climate change is driving extreme weather. Governor Newsom talks about it. If you don't believe in science, believe your own damn eyes. Since I've been in this role in the last 5 or 6 years, we experienced the driest 3-year period in the state's history, 175-year history, followed only a couple months later by what is probably the wettest 3 weeks in the state's history with those 9 atmospheric river storms that killed people and destroyed property. The Santa Ana winds are a phenomenon that Southern California experiences annually, and it's a natural phenomenon, but something that fueled these incredibly destructive fires is the driest start to a winter in Southern California in over 100 years. So you take natural phenomenon, you take the natural variation of our hydrology. California naturally has the most floods and droughts in our country, and then you supercharge that with climate change, and we have major challenge on our hands. So that's challenge number one. The challenge number two is, how do we proactively manage the health of our landscapes? We are on a journey in California to do more to think through how we manage our landscapes for multiple benefits. So in the case of water, how do we manage our landscapes to ensure that our communities have the water that they need? But then also the fish and wildlife that we care about, that we protect through laws, can actually thrive. How do we ensure that our landscapes actually are places that we can recreate, be outside, but also manage against catastrophic wildfire risk? There is so much that California is doing that you can be proud of as Californians to really be much more proactive, much more holistic, much more coordinated in the way that we're managing landscapes. In Southern California alone, there have been over 500 wildfire resilience projects in the last 5 years alone. Across our state, we have 2,200 wildfire resilience projects. So the idea is landscape management projects before fires ever come. Some of these, particularly in other parts of California, are prescribed fire projects, the idea of getting low-level fire on the landscape. This is an indigenous practice that was practiced in what we know as California for thousands of years. And our state came along and actually, in a very wrong-headed way, outlawed that practice, thinking that the way to keep communities safe was to exclude fire off the landscape, which is, of course, not part of our ecology. So it's activities like prescribed fire, fuel breaks around communities, including these Southern California communities that are in the wildland-urban interface, where we can, in an ecologically based way, managing the vegetation, reducing the density of our forests or landscapes. It looks different in Southern California with a chaparral environment than it does in other parts of California with more of a forest or woods. But we're committed to this because we understand that healthy landscapes mean healthy people. We're also at this incredible moment because while on the one hand we're dealing with what will likely be the most destructive fires in American history, at least in terms of the destruction of property, we're also dealing with this transition in our federal leadership. And if you're paying attention to the news, you know that we have a federal leader now that is making the case that California water management is people versus fish. And a memorandum was just released to federal agencies that suggested we need to put people ahead of fish, as if we were putting fish ahead of people. And so another reason I'm down here is to support regional water agencies like yours that are understanding that yes, we need water security for the future, and that's the critical priority, but we do that by maintaining a healthy watershed. It doesn't benefit any of us to drive fish or wildlife into the most endangered status because we have a federal Endangered Species Act, we have a state Endangered Species Act that protect those life forms. And we want to live in a state where species don't go extinct on our watch. So to me, at this moment in time, we need leaders who will stand up and say, it's not or, it's an and. We need to manage our water resources, we need to secure our water resources, and we need to manage and restore our natural systems. And you can say this about water management, you can say this about wildfire management, you can say this about coastal management with sea level rise. So I'm excited with you all being here today because I think we share a similar North Star. And that is to live in a place, whether it's a city or a county, whether it's this area, or to live in a state that is safe for people and healthy for really everything living there. And that is our commitment in California. It's to ensure that we are going to continue to prosper and grow as a state. We have enough water resources, and we're protecting people from big destructive forces like catastrophic wildfires supercharged by climate change. But we're going to do it in a way that we can actually be proud of our environmental management too. It's fascinating. When we participate, California, in international efforts on climate change, California, 5th largest economy in the world, so we don't have a role in the formal negotiations through the United Nations, but California is going to stay at it. President Trump just announced that he's withdrawing the United States from the Global Compact to combat climate change, making the United States one of only, I think, 4 countries in the world that is not part of that compact. California is going to stay at it. And we are a proof point, actually, in driving forward on the climate action we need. And what's interesting is as we do that, our scientists from around the world, an entity called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, says that about 40% of the near-term actions we can take in the next 10 years to work to stabilize our climate are nature-based solutions. Yes, it's about renewable energy, it's about zero-emission vehicles, about energy efficiency, but a lot of it is about better management of our landscapes to reduce the carbon emissions off our landscapes and then protecting those natural areas that exist across the world because those are the natural carbon stores to create a healthy carbon cycle. And so lastly, I'll say that's what we're doing in California with this 30 by 30. Believe it or not, I talked about that United Nations process. There's a compact on climate change. There's also a compact on biodiversity. And virtually every country in the world save the United States, has agreed on several actions to take, including a combined effort to work to protect and restore a third of the planet this decade, in 2030. And so California is stepping up. Our governor first, and then codified by our legislature, a new state law, made a commitment to say we are going to protect 30% of our lands and coastal waters. Set a high bar of protection, lands and waters that are durably protected, principally for environmental benefit. And believe it or not, over the last 2-3 years, we've increased conservation by over 1.5 million acres. And we're now just above 25% moving forward. California voters in November passed a climate bond, $10 billion, to invest in protecting ourselves against wildfire and drought, but also making investments in restoring and protecting natural places, not only to protect our natural resources, but to protect this incredible biodiversity that we have. So I'm excited. I know that California is a proof point of what can happen, and it only will happen if it's partnerships between our state, to the extent possible, the federal government, but then also local agencies. And whether that's water agencies or city and counties or habitat conservation districts, ultimately conservation happens on the ground. We're not sitting in Sacramento with a map of the areas to conserve. We're trying to essentially put wind in the sails of local groups, local leaders, local agencies to take these conservation actions that they need to. So just very excited to be here today, and I pledge our support over the next 2 years in the remainder of Governor Newsom's term to be partners with you all, to show how you in your region are getting it done. I am excited to learn more, really on a monthly basis, about the habitat conservation plan that's happening across your region, which is essentially a really sophisticated planning approach to enable more development, more growth, more housing, for example, but then do it in a way that also conserves the most environmentally sensitive areas and protects your watershed at the same time. So thanks for the opportunity to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. That was so outstanding, and we are really excited to continue this conversation across watersheds. So if our panelists, Nathan, Narit, Heather, can join us, please have a seat up here. We'll have some wireless mics that we can share, and we'll start to dive in a little bit into the stories across watersheds, what's going on, what are we doing to move the needle, and what does this mean relative to species in the Santa Ana watershed that we are trying to recover, like the Santa Ana sucker, Leesbill's vireo, and many, many other species. So let's go ahead and move through, move down. Let's see, where's this thing? Somebody have the, oh, I think this, is this? Yes. Trying to move this thing. Okay, I'm going to start off with some leading questions, but I already gave an overview of our speakers today. So we have Nathan, Narit, Heather, and Secretary Crowfoot, and myself. Where'd the other chair go? Is there? It's gone? You know what? I'll stay here because I have to navigate the slideshow. That's okay. All right. So to start us off, I thought it would be wonderful to have Nathan. He is a great communicator. He tells stories so eloquently in a small amount of time. And we had a recent one for the LA River California Environmental Flows Framework. He's serving on the tribal thematic technical working group. I think that's right. And among others. And he was explaining to us what the history is and the need for the transportation, literally like boating on the LA River, getting from point A to B, collecting the reeds to create the kayak type boats and so forth. So I wanted him to start us off by just telling his personal story, he and his father, and the work that has been going on in the San Gabriels. And so, Nathan, feel free to just highlight how, from your perspective, how important it is to educate and to steward and to build a movement for the San Gabriels and our river systems, including the LA River and so forth, and how you as a leader are making that happen.
Thank you for having me, Wendy. And I'm really just honored and thankful to be here with you all and to be able to share the space with you all. Haminat Nitewan Kauhavavit Nonim Hapshavitam. What I shared there is my name is Great Runner, and I always like to joke that I got that name because I ran track and I played baseball. And I was always someone who would be stealing bases while playing baseball and was safe and also just played different sports and was really active in that sense. Nonim Hapshavitam means that I am from the clan called Hapshavit in the eastern San Gabriel Mountains. And my family's lineage goes back 260 years within those mountains, and we share a real close connection and just a really, really special longevity with that space. My dad has been my teacher for my whole life, and many, many different elders that I've had growing up. My journey has been one of listening, really just being in the space, such as the San Gabriel Mountains, the San Gabriel River, and really just learning how to interact with that environment and what it means to understand the landscape. Everything around us, when we go up into the mountains, when we're here down below, has a story to tell. And it's something as simple as even a rock, right? How many people have passed by that rock? How many people have picked up that rock? How many different plant, animal relatives have been by that rock, right? The story goes on, and we create new stories today, and that's some of the most essential aspects of our cultures, specifically Native American cultures here in Southern California. There's this concept of reciprocity, and reciprocity is having an understanding of what it means to live with all these different things that we currently live with. And being able not just to, you give something and you get something back, but it's what you put out there may come back to you at some point. It's those seeds that you're planting. I do a lot of work with youth, and it's always about, instilling that little nugget or creating that transformative environment for those individuals to be able to one day take that, and we don't know how that's gonna grow within them, but it will eventually grow, and it's gonna grow in many different ways. And I owe a lot of this to my family, my dad, my mom, my sister, my grandma, just people who have been in my life, being elders, being mentors, showing me what it means to understand these spaces, but also to be in reciprocal relationship with these spaces. I've been hiking going up into the San Gabriel Mountains my whole life, and we are always boots on the ground, that's what we like to say, because we're up there picking up the trash, we're up there talking with the people, we're up there trying to figure out ways to share the beautiful story that these mountains have to share, and it's really a beautiful story. It goes back generations. From trade, it goes back to hiking 10 plus miles to get to my family's village, which is at 6,000 feet, that many people don't know about because these stories have been hidden and suppressed for so long. When I say Nonim Hapshavitam, I'm sharing with you my family's lineage, that special connectivity to the San Gabriel Mountains. And recently been able to really just share that unique beauty with people about why the San Gabriel Mountains are special and why we need to preserve these spaces for future generations. 5 million people visit the San Gabriel Mountains each year. That's a lot of people, right? And it's right next to a big urban population. And figuring out how do we live in that reciprocal relationship with the people who are going up there, but also people who are looking for access to open green space, but also to protecting everything that's within those spaces, right? So it's been a challenge, and it's been something that we've had to work real close with the state of California, different agencies at the federal level, with different nonprofit groups, different organizations to really find solutions, right? And some of the work that I've really been a part of is going to the White House, going to different places within the state capitol, but also too within Washington, D.C. to be able to talk with these individuals, seeing how we can have more of that reciprocal relationship with these spaces. At the lowest points, we did a cleanup one time and we had to pick up 2 tons of trash in 3 hours with 50 people. And that's a lot of trash, right? But it's people are going to these spaces and they want to be able to experience these beautiful spots. How do we cultivate an environment that can be sustainable going forward, but also to protect these spaces and be able to have that human to nature interaction, which is so critical and important for many of us, right? So that's some of the story of mine, some of the story about the work that I do. But I just really appreciate Wendy for having me today, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes. Can you talk a little bit about the expansion of the San Gabriel National Monument? And then I wanted to have Secretary Crowfoot weigh in on the need for this infusion of tribal leadership and stewardship throughout the state.
Yeah, most definitely can. And this expansion is really protecting spaces that we often don't have protected for many different reasons. My family's village, like I mentioned, is within that footprint of the National Monument expansion. And for us, this area is an area where we had difficulty trying to figure out how do we protect, in the sense, do we put a fence around it? Do we not put a fence around it? How do we keep these places sacred and also keep it in a way where it's preserved for generations to come? So being able to preserve areas like my family's village, areas such as, whether they're in the western Sangre Mountains with the Tatavium, for Invenio Tatavium, being able to protect sacred sites, archaeological sites, is really critical to us because we're always piecing together our history. We have oral history, we have traditions that have been passed down, we have other things that we reference, but for us, we are still piecing together what our history was, and it's something that's always going to be evolving and growing. So for us, it's really critical to have a campaign that really protected our spaces and also to advocates for us from a tribal side, where we here in California have gone through so much different waves of colonization that's affected our people. Being able for me to, as a young person, to share my language with you is really critical. That's something that is often was lost during the mission period, something that we had to bring back. So for us, for me, just sharing those simple words with you is something that is very sacred to us. So National Monument expansion really helped us be able to protect these spaces, but also to show what things we need to address and get that cooperation from all the different agencies to be able to move forward in that sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add, I've one of the most significant and meaningful experiences in this job I'm now in is how much I've learned about the history and the stewardship of this place we know as California. 200 years ago, when Europeans came into California in waves, and of course there was Spanish and Russian before that, they encountered an abundant environment, abundant natural resources, and they made a mistake. They assumed that was wilderness, and that was nature without people. And that is a myth. The fact is that people have been stewarding California's environment for thousands of years. Before European contact, this had the highest population density of any place north of Mexico City. Incredible environmental biodiversity, but cultural diversity. And as I've learned, it was tribal communities that were caring for these lands. John Muir came here and said you could walk a horse through the forest. It was this beautiful park-like environment where large trees were there and then you could get through. Well, that's based on traditional burning practices in those areas that he traveled through, although he and so many others never acknowledged that. So fast forward, agencies like mine separated ourselves from this knowledge. We dispossessed tribal communities of lands, and we took a different approach. And that approach has led to challenges, including catastrophic wildfire, where we've taken those practices off the landscape, and therefore we have major challenges. And now, coming full circle, we're working to support tribal leadership and learn from tribal leaders about these traditional ecological techniques that we can actually do across our lands. So our support for tribes in their leadership to establish these national monuments is just one more step in that direction. National monuments, it's kind of a funny way to explain a land designation, but California is about 50% federally owned and managed land. Think about all those national forests, the national parks, BLM land to the east. And most of that land is available for industrial purposes, oil drilling, mining, timber. But areas of special sensitivity, cultural sensitivity, and environmental sensitivity have been set aside by 18 presidents since the turn of the last century, since the time of Theodore Roosevelt. Republicans and Democrats have used executive authority through something called the Antiquities Act to establish these national monuments. And I'm so proud that President Biden, Vice President Harris, as one of their last actions, added 2 more national monuments in California. The Chuckwalla National Monument, about 600,000 acres adjacent to Joshua Tree National Park, and the Satitla National Monument east of Mount Shasta. And those were movements that were driven by tribal leadership, as was the successful movement to expand the San Gabriel National Monument that Nathan talked about, as well as what's called the Berryessa Snow National Monument by the Yoshadehi Wintun Nation near Sacramento. So I'm excited with what we're doing in California. I'm excited with where we're going. Part of this also involves ancestral land return. So the idea that tribes can do the best job actually caring for these lands. So how do we help get land back in tribal ownership and tribal stewardship? Both federally recognized tribes and communities that never achieved that federal recognition. So that, as well as last point, co-management. So entities like state parks, for example, manage a whole lot of land. And when we talk about ancestral land return, we're not talking about dismantling our state park system. We have 280 state parks, 1.4 million acres of land. But we've become enlightened, and our state parks folks have said, why not co-manage these lands with the people who know best how to manage them? So remarkably, today, 54% of the land managed by your state parks, the 280 state parks, are under co-management agreement with tribes, up from 0% 5 years ago. So we're making great progress with a lot more work ahead.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes. Okay. Oh, we're missing a whole bunch of photos. All right. So one other thing, thank you, Secretary Crowfoot and Nathan, and we will continue the conversation. I want to allow some time for questions at the end. And I know a lot of you are also new to this symposium in the 6th year. I just met someone from the Coyote Creek group that's a new nonprofit moving towards restoration there. I wanted to highlight some of the ways that we have made progress, we being the collective state parks, partnerships on things like the Ringe Dam removal and the Malibu Creek watershed, where Secretary Crowfoot will be going soon for fire-related needs. We are looking at the removal of a very old dam that is no longer needed and filled in with sediment. Bringing down barriers can be that blatant, but it can also be things like regulatory barriers. And so cutting the green tape, ways that California Department of Fish and Wildlife has moved forward to get funding to Southern California as well as Northern California and really accelerate things like fish passage, things like biodiversity for multiple species like the Santa Ana watershed and all of the work going on here. So I don't have all the pictures up, for whatever reason it's not showing, but basically bringing down barriers is something that is happening globally. And I mentioned the Dam Removal Europe movement. There's 20,000 dams across Europe, 150 countries, and their whole movement is actually it is a law that they need to remove barriers to river functionality. And so they are looking to the United States, and particularly California, because of the Klamath Dam removals, because they have some large dams that need to come out. So what I'm trying to say is the science that we're doing here in the Santa Ana watershed is very relevant on the habitat conservation planning, the larger master planning, the larger comprehensive adaptive management and monitoring. That science, that framework needs to be shared globally, and Secretary Crowfoot has done an outstanding job on making sure that those lessons are shared, and I know that each of you have things to contribute that way. So I just wanted to highlight that bringing down barriers to biodiversity and connectivity is essential. Okay, Commissioner Narit Katz, and just embodies all of biodiversity from every aspect of her career in teaching, as well as sustainability lead, working with the Department of Water and Power, and working with our wildlife. So I wanted Narit to share her highlights, her story about how she is pushing forward on urban biodiversity and also how that influences 30 by 30 statewide.
Thank you very much. Is it on? Okay, great. Really glad to be here with everyone. This is my first time to this symposium, but wonderful to see friends and colleagues. You know, I've seen a couple people today, Wendy and Heather, kind of get moved to tears by the importance of the work that we're doing here. And I found myself getting very emotional up here too. It's been a very difficult January for Los Angeles, and we all have friends and family that have been impacted, that have lost homes. And so it's never been as clear as it is today, the importance of this work, the intensity of the climate crisis, and everything that we're doing. I definitely want to emphasize everything that Secretary Crowfoot and Nathan have said so far about the importance of learning from the original caretakers of this land, whether it's cultural burnings or other practices. These co-management strategies have really been shown globally, and just indigenous management strategies, to be better for biodiversity. There are major global studies now that do show that indigenous managed lands do better for biodiversity and ecology than even, you know, pure conservation wilderness, you know, projects. So we're trying to put that into work in Los Angeles as well. So my main role is as Chief Sustainability Officer for UCLA, but I am serving right now as Commissioner for LADWP, which is a very heavy responsibility, especially right now. But we were able to move forward a major biodiversity motion for the utility that really is kind of crosses everything that we do, from thinking about our lands that we are now responsible for within the Santa Monica Mountains, and also all the way up to Inyo, of course, since LA has an impact beyond just Southern California. We've charged the department to strengthen the work with tribes in all of these areas, to try to incorporate traditional ecological knowledge, and very much to look to nature-based solutions, as well as beginning to really assess the biodiversity that is there. So we've just about finished a biological assessment of Chatsworth Nature Preserve, which is the only nature preserve in Los Angeles, and has some really unique habitat, vernal pools that aren't found anywhere else within the city of LA. And we'll be continuing that work elsewhere as well. I also serve as part of the expert council for the city of LA. So the city has made some very significant commitments around biodiversity. We developed an index based on the Singapore Index and put out a big report a couple years ago, and others like Isaac, who are here, were involved in that process. And now we're going to be working on a local biodiversity action plan. So Secretary Crowfoot mentioned these global agreements, and he and I were both at COP16, the global meeting around you know, charging all of these different countries with their action plans. Well, then the cities need to develop the local strategy, local biodiversity strategy and action plans. So Los Angeles will be working on that this year. In terms of 30 by 30, while we do have some specific lands that we hope will get counted towards the 30 by 30 goals, I'm newer to the initiative and the partnership coordinating committee, but what I'm hopeful for is that 30 by 30 can be, and California nature more broadly, can really be a catalyst for repairing that disconnect. So many of these problems that we're facing, from climate change to other, you know, ecological destruction, come from this myth that we're somehow separate, and this disconnect between people and the land. And that can happen especially in urban areas. We have a lot of research at UCLA that shows that lack of green space, lack of access to trees and nature has profound impacts on human health, even to the point of life expectancy, as well as overall wellness. And so how we care for our land, how we care for our biodiversity is very much how we care for ourselves and the ways in which we're connected. So hoping to work on a number of initiatives with partners in Southern California and across the state that will help bring the ethos of 30 by 30 to residents throughout urban areas. Los Angeles County, 1 in 33 Americans lives in LA, and I'm sure if you broaden it to Southern California and the other counties, it's even higher. So there's an enormous impact that can be had there in helping residents in these urban areas reconnect to the biodiversity that is often right in their backyards and can be, and to make commitments that support California's overall goals. So that's kind of what I'm working on, and I hope that's helpful.
That is very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Nareet. Not too long ago, Secretary Crowfoot and others from the Department of Natural Resources held right here in Riverside a 30 by 30 statewide conference, and many came from Department of Fish and Wildlife to researchers to tribal leaders and so forth. And so the way you can get involved is to attend some of these amazing one-day workshops, symposiums, set up your booth, tell your story, get involved with the Department of Natural Resources, and there's also regular talks, and Secretary Crowfoot's website, DNR's website has all of this information. So it's very accessible. We want everyone to be involved. And like Nareet said, it's bringing it home to our urban areas as well as the National Monument and the bigger spaces that are contributing to this change. Thank you, Nareet. Okay, let's move on to Heather. And Heather, I wanted you to talk a little bit about this ability to mobilize very, very quickly through your leadership as general manager, focusing on how we coexist with the natural environment. And behind us we have the San Bernardino K-rat, the burrowing owl. We've got Seven Oaks Dam, and the upper Santa Ana River wash after a nice rain, Santa Ana sucker, and there's like 22 other species. How is it that you and your staff, working with the partners, are able to do this work for comprehensive adaptive management and monitoring?
Thanks, Wendy. Is this one? Yeah. If that's not a charismatic microfauna right there in that kangaroo rat, I don't know what is. Could you get a cuter species? Oh, they're adorable. And Santa Ana sucker, of course, is dear to my heart, but not quite as cute. So how do you do it? Okay, first thing, I'm tired of hearing we can't because the truth is that we can. It's just really hard, and we have to want it. And as I said earlier, it's going to take the fierce resolve and the grit and the persistence and the generations of scientists and conservationists and politicians and the people who are committed to doing it. And so while I recognize that I am kind of the odd duck in the general manager world of California water agencies, I think there's only me and Jennifer Pierre who are biologists, general managers. The reality is that we need that perspective. The engineering in a lot of our water infrastructure is not the hard part anymore. It is how do you build water infrastructure that is consistent with, or at least not harmful, but even better, promotes biodiversity and enhances the landscape where we put it in. And so that takes a different type of thinking, and it is harder. It is, more complicated. It takes longer probably to get all of these different people around the table thinking through, how do you reassess this project so it's not just the black and white of the engineering designs, but looking at, all the different creative solutions that you can have. And that part is hard. People are hard. And, one of the things that I get frustrated with is that there is the physical landscape that we have to plan around, but there's also a regulatory landscape that is reality. And you guys have heard me say this probably every year at this symposium, accept reality that the Endangered Species Act does apply to us, even though we might be building great water infrastructure projects, But people live in California for a reason. I've lived in other states that do not have strong environmental protections, and it's a whole different world. And I came here from South Louisiana. They're literally losing their land every single minute because of, less than strong environmental protections. And so I just don't accept that we should do it that way, or we have to do it that way. And so I think the how is that I refuse to accept that we can't work it out by talking to each other. And so 11 years ago, when we started this Upper Santa Ana River Habitat Conservation Plan, lots of people said it was going to be impossible. You can't even get one water project permitted in the Santa Ana River, much less 100 water projects by 11 different agencies for a 50-year permit. Like, that just seemed impossible. But what I learned is that it was impossible if you tried to do it alone. It really did require the partnership of 11 agencies to collectively put their resources on the table and say, well, I have land and I have water and I have money. Let's put it all together to figure out how the puzzle works. And so here we are, nearing completion, hopefully. Joanna's in the audience. It's in final stages of review of this plan that is like groundbreaking, right? It's full environmental compliance for 11 water agencies in the, 5th largest economy in the world in a highly populated area. We can get it done. When you put your ego aside and you think about what can I do for this solution that we all need, and figure out what is the connection. So we're talking about connectivity on landscape level, but there's also connectivity on a agency level, on a population level, on a community level. And I heard one time this beautiful saying, and since I'm a water agency, someone that I met from, I think, the Shoshone tribe, actually, I was talking to him about water, and he said, people tend to forget that we are water and water is us. And if you try to remove yourself from the equation of all of these problems and put yourself outside of it, it just doesn't work, because we are part of it. Like, we are part of the system that we are trying to heal. And so as we talk about what's possible, just always keep in mind that we are the magic element in this challenge that we have, and our ability to open ourselves up to these possibilities of working together for the greater solution.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. It's really awesome. I want to allow time for questions so that we can engage with you on your thoughts and what you're trying to push forward. And while Secretary Crowfoot is here with us and this group of colleagues who really care about conservation and biodiversity. So I'm going to open it up. I think we've got mics here. Does anyone have some questions or just thoughts they want to share? Take 60 seconds. Does anybody? Michael.
Hi. I was just thinking, Nathan, as you were speaking your native language, I wondered if you happen to have like the name of the St. Gabriel River, in your native language, as we're thinking about renaming things like the Gulf of Mexico.
Thank you for that question. One of the really unique things about tribes here in the LA Basin and the greater LA area is that from a linguistic standpoint, there was a lot of different dialects. So there's Serrano, right? There's what you know as Gabrielino. You might hear Tongva Quiche, but there's different dialects within the languages itself. And one of the things with us is that we're big orators. We didn't have a written language, so we are true storytellers in that sense. And we're in a period of uncovering the different relationships that the different Native people had with these specific areas. So there might have been a name in Serrano for the San Gabriel River, and there might have been a name for the people who were in the San Gabriel area who might be Gabrielino, had a name for the San Gabriel River. And right now, it's not something that we are quite there yet. We know the name for the LA River in Gabrielino, but we're not quite there yet for the San Gabriel River. So I think the key point is that as we're in this period of emergence and uncovering our linguistics, which was lost in a lot of ways, also combined together during the mission period, where it was all kind of lumped into one group, now we're understanding the different dialects and the different ways that the Native people approach this landscape. So it's a period of discovery for us, and San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, the Yuhaviatam people, they've done a lot of work for the Serrano language, and so have a lot of different Native people here within the LA Basin of uncovering that language. So we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there, and it's some of the work that I'm helping uncover, but also to a lot of the people in my community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Other questions or thoughts?
I think I was given the mic, which is always dangerous. But one, wanted to thank everybody down there. It's really inspiring to hear such impressive perspectives, given that I feel like it's been a rough January. So thank you for that. I'm going to take the opportunity to ask Secretary Crowfoot a question, and thank you for your ongoing social media presence. I'm a LinkedIn fan, which is my old lady social media. So thanks for staying there and for representing California in the United States, regardless of what our political environment is. So I appreciate that. I'm curious about 30 by 30, and in particular, I know we've kind of hit that 25% threshold, and I imagine that 5% seems like such a small number, but I imagine it's a really hard last 5% to get. But I'm curious, once we hit the 30, how we view now managing that 30, and I imagine that 30 is not in the best shape, and so what our goals are as California, and maybe even at a national level, to now take that 30 and take it to a place where we'd like it to be, to restore that 30. And so I'm curious what the conversation looks like moving forward once we hit the 30 from a preservation perspective, what it looks like now to take care of it.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I'll just take your first comment as a prompt to just talk a little bit about this moment that we're in. I do spend a lot of time on social media because I think we all recognize that it's really important as more and more people are getting their information via social media versus traditional sources of information. And if you look at these wildfires that we're dealing with in real time, it's more important than ever to support local journalism with professional journalists that are held to a standard. Incredible reporting coming out of the LA Times and other publications, and combating some really ridiculous misinformation deliberately planted that frankly makes the whole recovery for these fire victims more difficult. So I would just encourage you all to be active users of social media, and to share information and to share knowledge, objective sources. We're entering into a really alarming time as it relates to all this, and so appreciate the comment. But on 30 by 30, one thing we want to do, we like 30 by 30 because it's galvanizing. Biology is complicated. And so sometimes on energy, we have a 100% clean energy goal, or we had a renewable portfolio standard that required our utilities to reach 33% by some period of time. Some domains lend themselves to these numeric goals more than others. And so, and it's really not usually nature conservation or biodiversity. So what I like about 30 by 30 is it's a clear near-term goal that we can be held accountable for. But it's a means to an end. It's not the end. So if we get 30%, it doesn't mean we've succeeded. We could do 30% in the wrong way, where we're just chasing the cheapest acres to put under conservation easement or to acquire for conservation purposes. We need to do it in a way that actually benefits biodiversity and our other key goals. And to your point, it's not about just getting the designation, it's about the active stewardship. Across the world, when Narit and I were in Colombia a few months ago, there's a lot of concern around so-called paper parks, where there are a lot of countries that are establishing national parks or protected areas, but then they have no way of protecting them. So actually the same resource extraction is happening before the park. So different challenges in poorer parts of the world than California, but in California, we have to hold ourselves to account that if we're actually protecting the area, we need to fund its management or manage or support others who are managing it. one of the benefits of ancestral land return, our idea is to, to support tribes to actually actively manage their lands. Or if we have state lands, to make sure, if it's our Department of Fish and Wildlife and our ecological preserves, that we're doing more to proactively manage that biodiversity. I do think we have a money problem in that a lot of the funding that we generate in state government is for one-time use. So this $10 billion climate bond that just passed, by law, these bonds have to be spent on one-time uses. They can't fund ongoing activities. So while we're continuing to make progress, we have about 4.8 million acres more to protect or conserve. That's what we're going to get by 2030 if we hit 30 by 30. We have to continue to figure out ways to actually fund the management. The San Gabriel's, Nathan, is such a great example. I mean, parts of the San Gabriel, I think about the east branch of the San Gabriel River, it's loved to death in the summer. It's a climate refugia for people to escape the heat when there's a heat wave, and it's free. It's incredible. People get up there, but I've been up there on those summer days, and it is overwhelmed. And if in this case, the Angeles National Forest doesn't provide trash cans or receptacles, that trash is ending up in the watershed. So I take your point that, it's critically important, yes, to meet this goal, that's part of it, but then continue to improve our management, not only for the nature, but for the people that are using it. Yeah.
So I think that this is an excellent example of where those partnerships come into play, because the state can help us acquire the land and conserve the land. But then we have to look at who is available out there who can help manage that land. And we've been able to, we're a water district in San Bernardino County, but we have worked with the City of Riverside Parks Department, the County of Riverside Parks Department, all these different entities who can actually be out there, boots on the ground, managing the land. And they might have funding constraints where they need a couple rangers. Well, we can help fund some rangers, which helps them with their staffing situation, and they can be out there doing weed management and things like that. And so, again, I believe that silos break communities. And so the more we silo ourselves away from the people who do something slightly different than us, or maybe even very different than us, then we lose the opportunities to really be proactive. We've been working with the San Bernardino National Forest on a Headwaters Resilience Partnership. And, we just went through the line fire, and there was tremendous damage to our watershed. And so I called the forest supervisor and I said, you know what, I know this is weird, but I got some great biologists on staff. Can we be part of your burn area emergency response team? And they said yes. We went out there, they said, here's what we can do. I was like, okay, how can we help? We need to fly LiDAR as soon as possible before it rains so that we can understand the burn effects. We got that going. So you always have an opportunity to reach across the table and say, like, I can be part of this solution. Here's what I can do. And when you put it all together, that's how we're going to manage the lands that we put into conservation. And that's how we're going to basically, amplify the value of every single dollar that we spend on conservation.
Excellent.
If we're continuing the conversation a little, I'll add to that the same challenge is true in the urban forest. So we have a lot of one-time funds, a lot of focus on planting trees in areas of the city that don't have them, but then the city is so stretched for budget, and there's often no follow-up to ensure that these trees actually successfully grow and are maintained. So DWP has been a longtime partner and funded this program called City Plants, where we're providing trees to residents, but now we're also working on a program with that to have tree ambassadors where residents are really trained to care for them and to be able to visit private properties to support and engage in the care. But there's a long way to go there, and we have a meeting coming up of a whole bunch of different folks working on urban forest in our region to really talk through some of these challenges and think about that maintenance side. But activating and engaging our residents in how we care for urban biodiversity is really key, especially with these, funding challenges, and definitely want to echo what Heather said about cross-agency work. Nathan, I don't know if you want to add anything on this on the San Gabriel side, or we can open for more questions. Okay, more questions.
All right, more question. Christian Broderick is who I saw first.
I just had a question, maybe it's possibly relevant. How do you, this is a question for Heather, but I couldn't probably address it. How do you maintain your optimism?
How do you maintain your optimism, Heather?
In the face of the sort of political setbacks.
Political setbacks.
Okay, so this is a room full of a bunch of nerds. Again, my people. Okay, so there's this thing that I like to say, and you have to use a mathematical symbol. So really hard, not equal sign to impossible. And really hard is not equal to impossible, but we have let ourselves believe that. And so I just refuse to believe that we cannot achieve our goals by working together. And people can be cynics, and they can be transactional, and they can be pessimists, and they can say we're not going to get it done. But I invite you all to come out to the field trip tomorrow at our Enhanced Recharge Project. That is a project that took 30 years to plan. We were able to build 20 new recharge basins, 300 acres of earth-moving equipment worth of work, going through a land occupied by an endangered burrowing mammal and many, many birds and many, many other species. And everyone was like, you're not going to be able to build that. It'll never get permitted. It got permitted. We worked through the entire nesting season. We built these amazing recharge basins that are going to make our region more sustainable. And the area in between these basins, we specifically are restoring with the key habitat variables needed for these native species to not just survive and persist, but I really believe with everything in me, it is going to be better habitat in the long run than it would have been without us. And so everyone told me that project was impossible. I will also add, it got done 18 months ahead of schedule and under budget, all because of the people who worked on it. So I don't know if that's the how, but that's what is in my mind at night, and I just refuse to accept that we can't get it done.
I think we have to cut the questions. I'm sorry, we're right at time. I want to thank the panelists and especially Secretary Crowfoot for making time to be with us today. We have a couple gifts for you and then lunch to go as you travel to Malibu. Here's your very own T-shirt with the logo, Santa Ana Watershed. And this is a wild salmon field guide of Southern California, and a quick note in here for you. So thank you so much to Secretary Crowfoot. We are really excited about supporting you and your staff moving forward as we do all of our great science and work together.
And can I just take the last word and thank you, Wendy, because you were the Energizer Bunny that got me down here and made sure I kept my commitment in this last couple weeks. Thank you. But I'll just say to the last question, which is a great question. I follow a scientist named Katherine Hayhoe, and she says we maintain hope by taking action. And I truly believe it's not a binary situation. It's not like we either wildly succeed or we're done. It's a matter of degree, and I think the action that you're taking, that you're considering taking here, matters. Not only will it matter to you over the next several years when there's going to be a lot to be discouraged about, but it matters to this region. It matters to the way that you adapt to these changes, and it matters to everything that's living here right now. So I'm just really appreciative of being here and being so action-oriented as a region.
We're going to be taking a couple photos, but lunch is across the street at the cafe, and there will be a long line. So if you want to start walking, feel free, but thank you all.
Does anybody else have a mic here? Let me grab the